Welcome to the P.A.S. Report podcast. If you're tired of censorship, outraged by government abuses, and thirsty for real insights, then you're in the right place. Get ready, because here, the fight for freedom never ends. Here's your host, Professor Nick Giordano.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to the P.A.S. Report podcast. This is your host, Nick Giordano, and I'm glad you could join me today. If you're not already a subscriber, make sure to follow and subscribe to this podcast so you never miss an episode. And don't forget to visit the P.A.S. Report website, PASreport.com, and share this episode with others. And this is a must-listen episode, perhaps the most important that I've done, because every American should listen. And I'm particularly talking about Democrats and those on the other side of the political aisle, because what is going on in America is not just dangerous, but we are witnessing our own demise. You know, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure this out. You also don't have to be a Trump supporter to recognize the damage that's been done to our institutions, to our country. Anyone who dismisses what it has taken place over the course of the last week does so at their own peril. And it's not just the last week, it's the last 2 decades. I'll get into that a little bit later. But while Democrats achieved their goal of getting a Trump guilty verdict, and now they can gleefully proclaim the former president is a convicted felon, what cost does it come with? What cost? Because it does come at a cost, and a cost that they may soon regret. But it's not just Democrats that will regret it. Every American who stood silent will also regret it, because we will all suffer the consequences. Again, this is not about Trump. This is much bigger than him. Trump is just one person in a moment of time. Our country is much bigger than one person. And if our country is so weak that it cannot withstand Donald Trump, as the Democrats are proclaiming, as the Never Trumpers proclaim, then our country doesn't deserve to survive. What I can say with 100% certainty is that what our country cannot withstand is when the entire system is weaponized to target political opposition. What our country cannot withstand is when politics becomes criminalized and all the levers of power are used to target anyone that challenges the system. Most importantly, our republic cannot withstand the blatant disregard for our Constitution and democratic norms that have kept the republic in check over the course of 230 plus years. And I want you to consider, in 1798, President John Adams signed the Alien and Sedition Acts into law. These acts were used to target political opposition. They were widely criticized for violating constitutional rights. And the backlash against these acts contributed to Adams' loss in the presidential election. It left a stain on his presidency, one of the great founding fathers. This historical episode serves as a reminder of the dangers of using governmental power to suppress dissent. It underscores that when there are consequences to abuses of power, the integrity of the system can be preserved and strengthened. John Adams was punished for what he did. But more importantly, it shows that our system only works when both sides believe the other is operating in good faith. But over the last 2 decades, we've seen these Stalinesque tactics that have been employed at every single level, and these tactics threaten the very foundations of our country. And you have some arrogantly celebrating the Trump guilty verdict. Recognize that this issue transcends one individual. The implications for our nation's future are profound. They are far-reaching, and it's my fear that irreparable damage has been done. I don't know how we come back from this point. I really don't know, and I hate to say that, but this is how free societies die. And students of history know that. Consider the fall of the Roman Republic. Julius Caesar's crossing of the Rubicon River in 49 BC was a turning point. Political norms were thrown out the window, and this is what led to the Republic's eventual collapse. Are we witnessing a similar disregard for the norms today? But this is exactly what happens when you have self-anointed guardians of democracy that intentionally blow up every single democratic norm because they believe that they're much smarter than everyone else. They believe that they could control the situation. They believe that they have it right. And in order to protect what they call democracy, they want to destroy it because they don't really want a democracy. What they want is authoritarianism. Do as we say. Capitulate. Follow. Do not challenge. Do not ask questions. Do not push back. And if you do those things, then you could have your free society. But if you dare to challenge the system, we will crush you. We will destroy you. This doesn't stop with Trump. I warned about this with the National Strategy for Countering Domestic Terrorism that the Biden administration issued in June of 2021. From there, we saw everything change. Parents at school board meetings that complained about what their children were learning were then being targeted. Traditional Catholics, because they oppose this whole gender ideology, because they have traditional views on certain aspects of life. All of a sudden, the government wants to label them as the potential domestic terrorists, domestic violent extremists. So it's not about Trump. And things will get worse because there's no accountability in the system. They think they can control this, but Pandora's box has been opened, and America has now entered this new unsettling era where it's hard to predict where it goes from here. And some people are so blinded by their political ideology, they are so blinded by their hatred that they don't realize how this ends, because it ends badly for everyone. It doesn't matter what your political ideology is. It doesn't matter what positions you take. If you're a student of history, if you understand the rise and fall of nations, if you know how nations go from free societies to authoritarian societies, you know exactly how this ends. Because we've seen it played out before time and time again. And to all those celebrating the Trump guilty verdict, you better recognize that there are no guarantees that your side won't be next, that your side won't face similar tactics and consequences because of this. And that's what I want to talk about in this episode. I want to focus on the repeated abuses and usurpations within the system. I want to show how this whole thing is a sham and the real intent is about power and control. And I will demonstrate the damage that has been inflicted on our republic. Most importantly, I'll talk about where we go from here. That's going to be the focus of this episode. So stay tuned and we'll be back after this quick break. Are you prepared for the unexpected? As a former emergency manager, being prepared is not a choice, it's a necessity, and that's where the Wellness Company comes in. Imagine having the peace of mind that you're equipped to handle any medical crisis, from tick bites to the latest pandemic. The Wellness Company's medical emergency kit is your lifeline, packed with essential medications like ivermectin, emergency antibiotics, antivirals, and more. This kit is your ultimate preparedness solution. The Wellness Company's team of renowned medical professionals, including Dr. Peter McCullough, Dr. James Thorpe, Dr. Harvey Risch, Dr. Drew Pinsky, and more. They are truth-seeking doctors, and they have designed a kit that sets the gold standard for safety and prevention. Don't wait for the next crisis to strike. Visit twc.health/PAS and use promo code PAS for an exclusive 10% discount just for being a listener of this show. Prepare today, rest easy tomorrow. Use code PAS at checkout. Welcome back, everyone. So for this segment, I want to dismantle the argument that we have to respect the jury's decision, because many on the left and even some of the on the right, they're attempting to legitimize this farce, and we shouldn't legitimize it. They say we must respect the jury's decision to maintain faith in our criminal justice system. But that's the point. We don't have faith in the system. How can our institutions have legitimacy when half the country no longer trusts them? This is especially true of the criminal justice system, because we've witnessed it get weaponized for political purposes. And let's look at the Trump case. Put aside your feelings about the man. I don't care about the man. You know, people tend to think, well, our country rises or falls with one man, but that's not true. It's not about the man. You may not like his personality. You may not like the things he says, how he conducts himself, but I don't care. You have to put your feelings aside and look at the kangaroo court objectively. Here's a guy in New York City real estate. Okay, he's been in the real estate industry for decades, and the left constantly claims that Trump is like a career criminal involved in criminal activity throughout his life. So you're telling me we have this lifelong career criminal, and the best the government can do is to charge him with this bookkeeping nonsense? Are you kidding me? That you have to do this legal jujitsu to turn misdemeanor into a felony, where the Federal Elections Commission already investigated, said there was nothing there. The Southern District of New York said there was nothing there. So you're using never before legal tactics in order to take down this lifelong career criminal. That just doesn't jive. If Trump is charged with a bookkeeping error, if that's what it was all about, trying to influence the campaign, remember, this dates back to 2016. Then why hasn't District Attorney Alvin Bragg brought charges against Hillary Clinton? Why not? Remember, these charges are from the same year, the Clinton campaign. Not a business like the Trump organization. The Clinton campaign wrote off the now discredited Christopher Steele Russian dossier as a legal expense. Now, this dossier led to years of a BS Russian investigation, which all turned out to be a hoax. It dragged the country through hell. And if this wasn't about politics and targeting a political opponent, then Hillary Clinton should have been charged the same time that Donald Trump was charged with the same exact crimes. And what Hillary did was actually far worse, because the FEC did fine her and say it was a violation, that it was trying to influence a campaign. And they hit her with the fine. She had to pay it back. But she wasn't charged criminally. So now Alvin Bragg can use the same tactics he used against Trump to prosecute Hillary Clinton. But he's not going to do it. And that's how you know this whole thing is a ruse. You have people on the left, including the president himself, claiming that Trump received a fair trial, that President Trump was allowed to put on a defense and defend himself from the charges that were alleged against him. Take a listen to it.
Donald Trump was given every opportunity to defend himself.
Well, the truth is he actually wasn't given every opportunity to defend himself. The judge was a partisan hack who played interference for the prosecution. That much is clear. He routinely denied the Trump team's objections while sustaining the prosecution's time and time again. The judge refused to force the prosecution to define the underlying crime at the start of the trial. He said that the jury could pick any number of potential crimes, including an FEC violation, including tax evasion. Trump was never charged with those things. Those are federal crimes. He was never charged with that. And how does a defense team prepare a proper defense when they don't even know what the underlying crime is? Then you had the judge deny a defense witness, an FEC expert on campaign violations. The judge allowed irrelevant testimony meant to embarrass Trump. And the judge says, oh, well, when it comes to Stormy Daniels, well, Trump's defense team should have objected more. They did object. And then this judge slapped him down, said, stop objecting. Are you kidding me? And the testimony was solely meant to embarrass Trump. It had nothing to do with any type of evidence that a crime was committed. You have the judge that contributed to Democrats, including President Biden, which isn't allowed. I mean, not for nothing. But as a professor of political science, I have the freedom to contribute to any campaign that I would like. Any campaign. However, I don't do it. And the reason I don't contribute to any political campaigns is because it's public information. And my students shouldn't be able to look up to see who I contribute to. They shouldn't see whether or not I have a financial vested interest in a particular political candidate. And the rules with judges are actually stricter. And yet he did. His daughter raised millions for Democrats, including from this trial. But perhaps the most egregious is that the judge got this case in the first place. That's like the most egregious thing, because he seems to get a lot of the Trump cases. A lot of cases that are in the Trump world orbit seem to go to Judge Marchand, which is odd because in New York, judges are supposed to be chosen randomly. It's supposed to be a blind system. Yet these cases keep going to Judge Marchand. What are the odds that this judge gets most of these cases? So where's the collusion? And if we're going to talk about collusion, let's just look at how a sitting member of Congress, Congressman Dan Goldman of New York, a Democrat, coached Michael Cohen on his testimony. So if you want to talk about collusion, well, you have collusion right there. There are so many unanswered questions. But unfortunately, many on the left, many of those that despise the president as a person, they don't care about these questions. They don't care about real justice. They don't care about the potential Fifth Amendment violations concerning due process, or the Sixth Amendment violations where the defendant has the right to be informed of the nature and cause of the accusation, where the defendant has a right to a compulsory process for obtaining witnesses in their favor. And that was denied in this case. So no, I do not have to respect the jury's decision. The truth is, this jury failed in their constitutional duties. They failed. They didn't take their oath seriously enough. Our justice system isn't guilty until proven innocent. It's not based on the rights of the prosecution. Our justice system is based on the rights of the accused, that you're innocent until proven guilty, and the concept of reasonable doubt, that if a jury believes the defendant is 99.9% guilty, but there's 0.1% reasonable doubt, they must vote to acquit the defendant. And the prosecution wasn't presented with any real evidence. They were only presented with character assassination. And the kicker is that the two main witnesses against Trump are the ones who engaged in criminal activity. You have Stormy Daniels extorted President Trump for his silence. That's extortion. You give me X amount of dollars, I'll keep my mouth shut. I won't try and destroy you and your family and your livelihood. That's extortion. That's illegal. And then you have Michael Cohen, who admitted to stealing $60,000 from Trump while handling this incident. Stealing, theft. Think about that. And now this moron goes all over X. He goes all over the MSNBC platform, goes all over the far left media, and he talks about accountability. Accountability. Are you effing kidding me? Accountability. The press should ask Cohen about accountability and demand that he gets prosecuted for grand larceny. If he really cared about accountability, he should be asked whether or not he's going to return the $60,000 he stole. And that's what we know. I could assure you, I could almost guarantee that he probably stole a lot more than that over the years. I could assure you that this probably wasn't the first time that Michael Cohen has stolen from the Trump organization. But according to the powers that be, we are not allowed to question the Trump guilty verdict. We must respect the jury's decision, according to our dear leader. And anyone questioning the trial, it results in undermining our institutions, it threatens democracy, and you just may very well be a domestic terrorist. Take a listen to what President Biden, our dear leader, had to say.
That's how the American system of justice works. And it's reckless, it's dangerous, it's irresponsible for anyone to say this was rigged just because they don't like the verdict. Our justice system has endured for nearly 250 years, and it literally is the cornerstone of America, our justice system. The justice system should be respected, and we should never allow anyone to tear it down. It's as simple as that. That's America. That's who we are, and that's who we'll always be, God willing.
Now, I want you to listen to another clip, because you have President Biden, Democrats, the far-left media, the never-Trumpers all screaming how if you question the outcome of this trial, you are undermining the criminal justice system. You're undermining our institutions that have kept us safe for nearly 230 plus years. So you're not allowed to question the courts. Well, unless you're a Democrat. Then you could do far more than question. Take a listen to this clip.
Supreme Court blocked me from relieving student debt, but they didn't stop me.
And I'll tell you, I have a unique position as vice president to spend a lot of time with our president. And on this subject, I remember sitting in the Oval Office with our president, Joe Biden, shortly after the United States Supreme Court struck down our initial plan to forgive billions of dollars in student loan debt. A different leader, a different kind of leader, would have thrown in the towel. Not Joe Biden.
When the Supreme Court told me I couldn't, I found two other ways to do it.
The Congressional Black Caucus said the Supreme Court has thrown into question its own legitimacy. Is this a rogue court?
This is not a normal court.
I want to tell you, Gorsuch, I want to tell you, Kavanaugh, you have released the whirlwind, and you will pay the price.
So I am reckless and a threat to democracy for questioning the jury's verdict. Yet President Biden brags about defying the Supreme Court, ignoring the decisions that the Supreme Court renders. And then you have Senator Schumer, the Senate Majority Leader, the highest powered Democrat in the United States Senate, who actually threatens Supreme Court justices, telling them that they're going to pay a price. Yet the ones that question the verdict in the Trump trial, they're the ones that are the threat. And it's not just Biden and Schumer. For days, I've heard of this idea that no one is above the law. I keep hearing that mantra, which is a bunch of BS.
The American principle that no one is above the law was reaffirmed.
That's actually laughable, because the truth is no one is above the law except James Clapper, who lied to Congress and was never charged for committing perjury. John Brennan, who lied to Congress and was never charged. You have the Central Intelligence Agency, which spied on sitting members of the United States Senate Intelligence Committee. No one was charged or held accountable for that. Highly illegal. Lois Lerner weaponized the IRS, found in contempt of Congress. She was never charged. Eric Holder was found in contempt of Congress. He was never charged. James Comey and Andrew McCabe leaked classified information, well known. They were never charged. Andrew McCabe lied to investigators. He was never charged. Hillary Clinton built a private server for official government business, never charged. Destroyed 33,000 government emails, never charged. And this was after a congressional subpoena was issued to preserve those emails. She destroyed the server. She smashed electronic devices, including government devices, was never charged. Listed the phony Russian dossier as a legal expense, never charged. Uma Abedin, Cheryl Mills lied to investigators, never charged. Hunter Biden, he might be being charged with the gun crime, lying on his gun form, but he was never charged with the more serious crime of tax evasion. And the statute of limitations were allowed to expire on him. FBI officials lying to the FISA court repeatedly, illegally accessing the NSA repository on Americans. The courts, the federal courts, have lambasted the FBI on several occasions about this over the last several years. Has anyone at the FBI ever been charged for illegally accessing the NSA repository on Americans? You have the United States Postal Service with their ICOP program, their surveillance program. They were never charged. Department of Homeland Security officials sanctioning the overt human intelligence collection program, never charged, even though it was illegal. You have 52 intelligence officials who interfered in the 2020 elections by declaring Hunter Biden's laptop as Russian disinformation. They were never charged with interfering in the election, trying to subvert an election. And the list goes on and on. Now, for those that may disagree with me, I challenge any one of you to dispute anything I just said. Dispute the examples I gave. I dare you. Try and challenge me on it. And then ask yourself, what's a bigger threat? The FBI abusing its power, lying to FISA courts, illegally accessing the NSA repository on Americans, or Trump paying off a porn star? What's a bigger threat? CIA officials spying on sitting members of the United States Senate Intelligence Committee, duly elected members and their staffs, or Trump paying off a porn star? What's a bigger threat? James Clapper and John Brennan lying to Congress, telling Congress that the American people weren't being spied on, or lying to a porn star? What did more damage to the United States? Masking kids, children, keeping them out of school for 2 years, suffering huge amounts of learning loss, or paying off a porn star? What's the bigger threat to the system? What caused more damage to the system? So dispute anything I just said. And I challenge anyone, especially the Biden defenders out there, those who scream about threats to democracy. Think about this. When you realize what's really going on, it isn't about Trump. It has nothing to do with Trump. It's about power, raw power. And that's why they use these Stalinesque tactics. So the question that remains now is, where do we go from here? And I'll explain that when we get back from this quick break. So hang tight. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everyone. So the undisputable truth is that until the bureaucrats face real accountability, or until the Democrats face the same retribution, this continues to get worse. And that's where it gets dangerous, because the only way it stops is by making them regret going down this road in the first place. Show them that Republicans can use the same tactics. And to begin to reduce the size and scope of the government, return it to a limited form as intended by the Founding Fathers. You know, I consistently hear from many on the left, and even some on the right, that the founders would have been horrified at the prospect of someone like Trump getting into office. Now, I dispute that premise right off the bat, but let's just hypothetically say the founders would be horrified at someone like Trump. Well, what's worse, a Trump or undoing every single institution and turning it and using it as a political cudgel against your opponents? What is worse? What puts us in more long-term danger? Trump, who could only serve another 4 years max, who's at the age of 78 years old at this point? What's a bigger threat to the system? One man or the institutions that will exist long after the one man is gone? Now, I don't believe the founders would be horrified of someone like Trump. I do believe that the founders would be far more horrified by everything this government has done over the last several decades. They would be appalled that the American people allowed the government to expand far beyond its original intent. They would be appalled that we betrayed the principles of limited government that they so carefully crafted. They would be appalled by how our institutions have been politically weaponized to target political opponents and silence dissent. They would be appalled by the erosion of checks and balances, by the centralization of power, by the blatant disregard for our Constitution and the abandonment of individual liberties, because that's what would have been their true nightmare, not Trump. And as they gleefully celebrate the Trump guilty verdict, they don't realize that the system can easily be weaponized against them. They warn of a Trump dictatorship, but they are the ones laying the foundation of an authoritarian society. And there's no guarantees on who's going to win this battle. The Democrats in our bureaucracy have gone far beyond anything that Trump did. Consider in the previous segment where I played the clip of Biden bragging that he defied the judicial branch of government. Did President Trump ever defy a Supreme Court ruling? And the answer is no. Sure, Trump criticized the media and the intelligence agencies, but did he shut down the press? No. Did he shut down our intelligence agencies? No. And why is criticism of the press and intelligence agencies such a bad thing? We don't elect journalists. We don't elect members of the intelligence community. They aren't the ones that are supposed to be running the country. And yet we have elected officials who live in fear of bad coverage and an intelligence community that, in the words of Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, has 6 ways from Sunday to get back at you. And how many times have our intelligence communities, our intelligence agencies broken the law? How many times have they violated the Constitution? Not just by targeting Trump, but by targeting the American people themselves. So I ask again, who is the bigger threat? As for the media, they deserve the amount of criticism they get. You still have some great journalists like Miranda Devine, Byron York, Molly Hemingway, John Solomon, others that I can't recall off the top of my head. But there are a lot of journalists that are nothing more than ideologues who willingly lie about everything. They're complicit in the flagrant abuses of power by the bureaucracy as well, because they serve as the cover-up team. What about the criminal justice system? We just witnessed Alvin Bragg and Judge Merchan make a mockery of the criminal justice system where they did legal jiu-jitsu to bring these charges in the first place. What about the E. Jean Carroll case, where she worked with the New York State legislature just so that they could pass a temporary law to bring a case against Trump, extend the statute of limitations, just so she could sue him. Then it expires and no one else could bring that same lawsuit. Everything they have accused Trump of doing, they themselves are guilty of, and they have done enormous harm in the process. But it goes well beyond Trump. It's about the millions of people who have been censored and silenced over the last several years. It's about the whistleblowers who are punished because they speak out about the agencies they work for abusing their power. They speak out and criticize how their agencies are violating the Constitution with impunity. It's about the double standards that permeate our society at every level, where some people and groups are targeted by the bureaucracy and bureaucrats for their political beliefs, and those in those positions of power remain above the law. It's about the millions of kids who were kept out of school for nearly 2 years. It's about the petty tyrants who knowingly destroyed, intentionally, actively destroyed the livelihoods of those who dissented from their totalitarian decrees. It's about spending 20 years in Afghanistan at the cost of 2,459 service members' lives who were killed in action, tens of thousands wounded, nearly $2 trillion spent. Yet the Taliban is better armed and equipped today than prior to 9/11. But yet, Trump's payment to Stormy Daniels, that's the crime of the century. It's about the hundreds of billions of taxpayer dollars that are routinely transferred overseas to benefit other nations as they ignore the needs of America and Americans. It's about the open borders, prioritizing those who come into the country illegally over the people our officials took an oath to serve. It's about the failed education system that pushes leftist ideology despite children being unable to read and write. You have academic proficiency levels being at all-time lows, but yet they want to push gender ideology on impressionable youth and take it away from the family. It's about how criminals are treated as victims, streets are becoming unsafe, cities are becoming unlivable, and the real victims are the ones that are actually demonized. It's about putting criminals before the brave men and women who serve as police officers, who are on the front lines to keep us safe, and yet they're the ones the left wants to target. It's about targeting parents who complain at school board meetings and then trying to investigate Moms for Liberty similar fashion to the KKK. It's about equating Catholics, traditional Catholics, to domestic violent extremists because they hold traditional values. It's about destroying the morale of the strongest military in the world by labeling many who serve as extremists and white supremacists, despite a thorough investigation actually showing the exact opposite. It's about promoting a false history that seeks to undermine our founding and our values, destroy the American identity, and it's about the cultural rot that we're witnessing within society, that you have entire generations that have no clue about our values, about our principles, no idea about the Constitution. It's about turning the greatest country in the world into a banana republic, because that's what happened this last week, and it's a few decades in the making. The Stalinesque playbook has been fully employed, and I warned about this. I warned about this years ago. Tyranny isn't always ushered in through a violent revolution. History has shown that tyranny is often invited. It's invited through elections. Just look at Nazi Germany. And understand that there are many on the other side who hope a right-wing nutjob does something really stupid so that they can justify an even bigger power grab. So it justifies everything they've done up until this point. And I have warned that whether wittingly or unwittingly, they are creating the next Timothy McVeigh. Do not fall into the trap. If Republicans, conservatives, and other Trump supporters were a real threat, we would know it by now, considering that they're the ones that actually own the guns. The truth is that most people want to just be left alone. They don't want this big, almighty, powerful bureaucracy to regulate every single aspect of their lives. And the only way to fix this is to hold those responsible accountable, not through a violent revolution, but through engagement. And Democrats need to realize that there's no lock. If this does fall into an authoritarian system, well, they created the conditions. And it may not be Trump or Biden that becomes the dictator. But sooner or later, a dictator will rise. And no one has any idea. No one can predict what's going to be the political ideology. What party are they going to come from? So I encourage every American to speak out against this. This isn't about Trump. You don't like Trump? Don't vote for him. I don't care. This is much bigger than that. But for those that do care, we have to fix this. We have to. And we fix it by participating in the system. The majority of Americans don't participate. The majority of Americans don't vote in elections. Actually, voter turnout is pathetic in this country. And if you say that your vote doesn't matter or our elections are rigged, so what's the point, then you're a moron. You are part of the problem. If you want to restore our Constitution, then you're going to go out there and you'll vote. You'll actively try and get other people to vote, especially those who haven't voted in an election cycle in years. Some haven't even voted in an election in their entire lives. If you're worried about elections, then become a poll worker. Volunteer for it. Stop complaining. Stop sitting on the sidelines. Volunteer for political campaigns. And I encourage you to volunteer for the candidates that demonstrate integrity and an appreciation for fundamental American values. I don't care if they're Democrat or Republican. Fixing this requires that we get more active in our communities, that we start joining the civic organizations that make our communities better. It means that we begin to consider careers in public service. Take over from the bureaucrats that have been there for decades. We can blame the politicians and the bureaucrats as much as we want, but ultimately our future is going to rest in the American people's hands. That's what it's going to do. So we are the ones that are going to bear responsibility for the future outcome. And if we continue down this current path, well, it's a pox on us. The people will then get what they deserve. Unfortunately, those who were actively speaking out against it, those that were warning that we're all going to suffer, well, we'll have to suffer with you, unfortunately. You know, despite the challenges we face, I do believe that there is resilience in the American people. I do believe that there is strength in our nation. Our nation, we've overcome immense obstacles in our past, and we have the power to do so again. But we need more statesmen in office. We need people that see beyond the D's and the R's. We need people that understand that we have our political differences. I don't shame anyone for disagreeing with me on the political issues. We all have our different opinions on the political issues. But if we can somehow get back to remembering who we are as Americans, somehow get back that American identity, understand our Declaration of Independence, our Constitution, understand how they serve as a unifying force, then maybe we could begin to heal our nation, make it stronger in the process. A future where our institutions are actually transparent and are actually held accountable for their actions. A future where justice is truly blind. And most importantly, a future where the concepts of liberty and limited government are actually appreciated and defended. We have the ability to shape the future. It starts with each of us taking responsibility and making the commitment, not just going along to get along. It's to call out the abuses despite the blowback we may get. Despite being ostracized by certain members within our community, speak out against this, to warn that tyranny is coming, and it only comes if we allow it to come. Remember, America's rise and fall rests in our hands, and the question is, which path are we going to choose? That's the question. Now, I hope you found the content of this episode informative, and I hope that those of you who may disagree with me on the political issues begin to see the dangerous position that we find ourselves in. This will not end the way you think it will. I can promise you that. And so you need to be aware. You need to wake up. Share this episode with your family and friends and on social media. Subscribe and follow this podcast. I want to thank you for joining me, and I'll be back next week with another great episode of the P.A.S. Report podcast.
Thank you for listening to the P.A.S. Report. Don't forget to rate, share, and hit that subscribe button. That way you'll never miss an episode. For more exclusive content and updates, visit us at PASreport.com and follow Professor Giordano on all social media platforms at P.A.S. Report.